Wondering that for the millionth time, I looked up in thought and saw a drop ceiling less than half height of what I remembered the rest of the facility having. Then I realized that I've got to be looking for an upstairs. I headed back out into the hallway, feeling one room closer to finding the main corporate office and hopefully the kitchen break room. On my way out, I found a first floor map and a plastic sleeve up on the wall that they had left behind. I thought it would be helpful, so I grabbed it for reference. I looked at it for a minute, then I folded it up neatly and put it away in a pocket. Chapter 13. Walking the Line. When I walked out of the lunchroom this time, I noticed 7 colored stripes on the floor and looking along the outer walls for some kind of legend. Plastics, papers, batteries, glass, metals, receiving, and lobby. Lobby! Okay, that makes sense. Man, I love office floor management. When it is done right, it is so freaking awesome, so I followed the lobby color. Except, to be honest, I wasn't really sure which color it was since it was dark, and with my flashlight I couldn't be completely sure what color it really was. So like a kid following a string maze, I focused on making sure I didn't accidentally get screwed up. I stayed on the correct line by walking on the one that looked the most similar to the one that said lobby on the sign. As I got to the intersection where all the lines started splitting off, I subconsciously looked left and right, and sure enough there were signs everywhere saying to stop. And similar signage that would say to look around and be aware and wear safety vests, etc. That's when I noticed on the walls that there were earplug dispensers. I love those. And the triangle cone hazard dispensers and all kinds of stuff. But no vests. Those probably got doled out at the lobby for visitors. Okay. Before I took the last turn to follow the line to the lobby, I shined my flashlight inward towards the main facility again for reference and repetition. That's when I noticed my flashlight's beam had started to get significantly weaker. I hadn't noticed in the lunchroom because it was smaller in there, but out here I really noticed it with nothing to reflect the light off of. I probably haven't changed the batteries in this thing in like 8 months, so how long have I been out of work? Over a year? 2? So yeah, I have no idea how long it's been since I've changed these batteries. I'm just glad I always spring for lithiums. I need to change these soon. With that, I use what's left of my flashlight's low energy to make my way to the lobby. Chapter 14. The Grand Lobby. Lobbies are usually an interesting creation in office buildings because they need to be open to the public and visitors and still provide some kind of functional security also. As such, I must sheepishly admit they are fairly easy to use to my advantage depending on the situation at the front desk. As a prior security consultant, I always reported my findings to the highest ethical standards, but here I was going through another building like I belonged here, and it was honestly like the building itself had personally invited me, and that's how I always felt in buildings. And no part of the building ever made me feel that way more than the lobby. Open and welcoming were exactly how lobbies were designed to make you feel, so mission successful. This lobby was definitely inviting, more like normal lobbies. It had access to both the offices upstairs as well as the rest of the facility area. This made it the most convenient area and the most comfortable area to wait at. That unfortunately also made it the most vulnerable location in the building, which is because lobbies always face the road in the absolutely most public and vulnerable way possible. I always felt like it was partially to assuage the ego of a building developer, but then partially I feel like it ends up reflecting a lot of the CEOs also. This is why the lobby in a lot of ways reflects the design of the boardroom and the CEO's office. It's like, how much ego can they cram into the building itself and then ignore that the building needs to function in other ways also? Things like being secure and safe and sustainable to maintain seem to fall by the wayside so often. The thing is, a lot of CEOs don't care about most ostentatiously audacious building. Most business owners are actually running small businesses, 500 employees and under. In regards to facilities, the priority is usually a good, functional, sustainable building. They don't want to get taxed to death and not spend over half their fixed overhead on healthcare. Companies like the one I was in right now used to employ most people before things got that way. A funny anecdote I remember is how a lot of companies would buy huge buildings and then immediately have their stocks tanked due to some colossal failure that they were hiding. It had become an inside joke that whenever a company bought a new giant building for themselves, it meant to sell their stocks. Oh, there I go again. I need to get this flashlight's batteries changed out. I wasn't going to risk any more rooms with the beam as weak as it was getting. I wasn't going to risk the battery change anywhere with direct light in sight anywhere near the street, so I made my way to the lobby's administrative desk. I saw the desk and immediately knew it would be big enough for my task. I got my cell phone out and got it powering up so it would start its boot up routine. I looked around and in every drawer in case there was a standalone light, and unfortunately there were none. It looked like this person had cleaned out their desk as well, which was fine. It was plenty deep as well as high, and I had everything I needed. My phone finished booting up after a few moments, and I immediately checked the battery in time. I saw the temperature readout on my home screen tiles, and it said it was much warmer than it actually was. It probably hasn't updated since yesterday evening sometime, I thought. I debated trying to connect, have it update, and have it tell me when exactly the sunrise was. That would take too much power, though, and who knows if I could even get a strong enough signal for data. I needed a relatively strong signal to pull information like that. So I just guessed. I probably still had well over 2 hours of darkness and around a quarter or less of battery, but again, once it gets below a third, it's anyone's guess as to how much life a phone would have. My phone didn't immediately die at a third battery like most, but it was still questionable duration at this point. I also checked the cell signal, and there was still one tiny bar of cell signal available. Apparently there was a cell tower still fighting to stay alive out there somewhere in the city. I took 3 new AAA batteries out of my pocket and put them up against my phone. I tried to set them in a way to where gravity couldn't pull them down to the floor, then scattered them in 3 different directions. That would cost many precious time with the light and cold that I couldn't afford, and I realized that I have way too many parts to juggle and deal with gravity. I take the backpack off and set it down to make a nest for everything, and agreed to myself that that was a much better idea. I take the batteries out and set them in a new nest I made. I take the phone and set them in a new nest and set them to one side, and I take the phone and lean it up to one side to shine the light on the rest and turn off my flashlight. Another reason I needed the nest is that when I first bought this flashlight, one of the customizations I did is took the horrible clip off. The clip had nearly no retention and was useless. It enjoyed flinging itself off like a lightning bolt under any more than its own weight. So now, being perfectly cylindrical, this flashlight also would have rolled right off the table. Someday I vowed myself to get some shock cord and cinch it up, tie it into a lanyard. Now my flashlight was safely in the nest I made for it. I knew my phone would stay awake for 15 minutes because I'd set it to a 15-minute sleeper timer ages ago for a phone game I'd given up on. The final straw in the game was when I finally figured out the scheme in its system between Tier 8 and 9. I was so proud I'd discovered the virtual gate without spending hardly any money, and that was my way of beating free-to-play games. I enjoyed learning their system by spending little to no money. This was a particularly good game, and it broke my heart that there was such an astronomical leap between Tier 8 and 9, and exponentially in 9 and 10. I had done the math, and while I had gotten to Tier 8 with maybe $5 of real money, getting to 9 would have cost something like $200. Getting to 10 would have cost around $500. And hearing chatter back and forth in game between players, people at those high levels had also found a way to cheat in a way they would have never lost battles versus each other. I uninstalled the game that day. It was a bittersweet removal. Anyway, as I thought about that and worked on my project, I knew I was running out of time to swap these batteries out. As if my phone wanted to remind me, it made 3 beep noises quietly to let me know it was running low. I guess I had forgot to turn the volume off, but it was really low, so it ended up being okay. Although in my mind, it felt like it echoed off the walls of the buildings, when in reality it was probably only in the cubby of the desk. I turned the volume off, then tapped the menu option and sent the phone into overtime emergency mode. That shut off all the non-essentials to keep the phone running a little longer. This was in order to keep the light on because it was pitch black in here, and trying to switch out 3 AAAs in the dark would risk reversing the leads. That would burn my flashlight out, leaving me in the dark for several hours in 30-degree or so temperatures. Some flashlights had that protection, but mine did not.